creative professional working with clients and peers, I often find myself in a loop, constantly typing out feedback on multiple devices and tools. Discovering Pactto has allowed me to eliminate typed feedback and instantly send a recorded video with my action items. With Pactto, I can easily review videos, websites, images, 3D files, and audio files. My feedback can then be sent as a link with clear action items faster than any other tool out there. Pactto has changed my daily lifestyle. I now have more time than ever to do what I love most.
Hello, guys. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Damian Borba, and today I'm very happy to be with Susan and Guthrie, longtime friends. We met the first time when I was a product manager at Adobe in San Francisco. Then when I started Pactto as a startup, and now we're talking again. It's almost like we were talking in the pre-AI era, and now we're talking about the AI era. And I'm super curious to hear your thoughts on everything that we're doing right now. So how about you guys start with intros? Maybe a little bit of your background, what you guys do, and how people can find you.
Okay.
You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Go for it.
My background, I have a PhD in psychology and a long career in applying psychology to design. So I've been really active in the user experience world and the behavioral science world, teaching, speaking, consulting. Guthrie and I have a company called the Team W where we do that work together. Guthrie, I'll let you go next.
Yeah, so my background is in economics, behavioral economics, and then also I have a law degree, went to law school, so I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Illinois. But these days I mostly help run stuff, do a lot of operations, a little bit of behavioral science and behavioral economics, amongst other interesting things. I will, just before we begin, state that while I am no AI expert, I do at least have local AI models running on my computer at home using Ollama. So I have like just a whisper of AI street cred out there.
Impressive. That's impressive. Just the fact that just to start it locally, that's a challenge. It's not easy.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Ollama. That makes it pretty easy on Windows.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, thank you so much, guys, for the time again. It's almost like 2 years ago, the last time we spoke. And as I said in the beginning, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this core belief that we have on Pactto, right? For Pactto, we believe that creativity is uniquely human. And not everyone agrees with that, especially now in the era of AI, where AI can do so much, can generate so much, all right? And we want to allow creatives that work in agencies, videos, and all that to express themselves the best way possible with clarity, something that text doesn't do. And what do you think about that core belief? Like, what's your take on creativity being uniquely human?
Well, I have a lot of opinions about creativity, so I'll try and keep it brief. It used to be if you said is creativity uniquely human, you meant compared to like dogs or primates, right? Not compared to other machines. There's not definitive research that shows that creativity is only human, but I think the general scientific consensus is that it is uniquely human. And I have looked at the brain science research behind creativity, and there are the way the creative process works is really all about the human brain and how the human brain processes information consciously and unconsciously, and how it communicates inside of itself in ways that we're not even aware of. So because of that, because of how creativity works in the brain, I'm of the belief that it is uniquely human because, we have those brains, and other entities, whether living or not, don't have those brains. I think our brains have evolved to do the kind of creativity we do. And so it is very much a human thing. Guthrie, do you agree with that or disagree?
I'm probably there. I think there's probably two different types of creativity. I think that's I don't want to jump immediately into semantics, but I do think that there's so for example, if you think of the way that a a cat plays with a toy or a squirrel builds a nest, a bird's nest, right? Like that, there's a form of creativity there where it's like, hey, I found like an old like piece of plastic and I've woven it into like a nest, like there is an inherent creativity. So in one hand, there's creativity, which is here's a problem or I want to express myself in a certain way. And animals can do that, um, uh, chimpanzees can throw rocks at each other, or there's a way to express yourself in the world that animals, mostly mammals, can do, and that is creative in a sense in that it's not mechanical, right? It's organic. There wasn't something there and then something made something happen. So that's one type of creativity, and that there is a little bit of like sort of random number generator going on there a little bit, like this dog likes to go 3 times before it sits down for bed, and this dog too, it's kind of a preference thing. And then I think there's perhaps maybe what you're a little bit more interested in, which is this idea of human creativity, which is, I think, one part, Susan, like you said, sort of brain sciencey. I do think it's also one part culture. So there seems to be a drive, a determination to stand out from what there was before. So imagine someone who simply rewrote different versions of like Romeo and Juliet. So it's not modern day Romeo and Juliet. It's not like Romeo and Juliet, but like some sort of interesting spin. It's just Romeo and Juliet, except sometimes the names are different. Maybe it's Romeo and Juliet, but it happens in like medieval, Russia or something, right? It's just like the same story.
Yeah.
That's kind of creative, but it's not really creative, we're just sort of redoing the same thing. And so I think there's a human aesthetic to finding out what's what is cool now, and then that becomes passé and becomes uncool, and then there's the creativity is, okay, what can we do to signify that we are not part of that kind of main thing that has become, and that is just sort of a cycle that happens. And so I think that part, which is like I need to differentiate myself, the culture part, I think that part is unique. Tough question off the bat. That was long-winded.
It is. Sorry. I mean, the other thing I want to mention is that one thing that we do know, or we're pretty sure is unique to humans, is definitely part of the creative processing that I know about, is that we run simulations in our mind unconsciously. We run what ifs. A lot of them, we cycle through them. And to me, that's very much a part of the creative process. And that's a thing that humans do that Guthrie, for instance, even other primates don't do as much or as well as we do.
That's so amazing, so inspiring. I feel like that imagination of something that doesn't exist yet, right? That trigger, that, oh, I see this thing. It's almost like a vision, like Walt Disney, when he thought of Disneyland, it was something in his head that didn't exist. It was insane, and once it's built, it's obvious. It's amazing. But that trigger, that idea, that spark, how do you guys think that start? Where does creativity start in terms of conditions, chemicals, like all, like what makes it not just cultural triggers, but what else is there that's different? And also, like when you mentioned animals and all that, one of the things that we're trying to do is give creatives this comfort that AI is not a replacer, it's not a threat, it's a tool, because this process of thinking the new out of nowhere, maybe not out of nowhere, but this spark is something that, in our opinion, in our core belief, it's uniquely human.
Well, Susan, do you want to start with just just like a 2 minute? Here's how creativity works in the brain, just so we're all on the same page.
You want me to do that, Demi?
Yeah, well, because
Yeah.
I know you can do it, and so
Yeah, so, and it does depend, Guthrie mentioned semantics, but the definition is important too, right? What do we mean when we say we're being creative? And I like a definition that has to do with creativity has to do with producing something new that is of value. And, so it's new and it has some kind of value to somebody, even if it's just yourself. So what we know about creativity in humans, at least, is that there are three brain networks. And a brain network is not a brain structure, but it's a connection.
I think network's a good word.
Yeah. So there's three brain networks. One is that are involved. One is the executive attention network. That is the conscious part, one of the conscious parts. And so that's where you focus. You have a vision, you have an idea, like you mentioned about Disney. I wonder if we could do this. Or maybe you want to solve a particular problem, because problem solving is part of creativity as well. So that's where you focus, and that's where you consciously focus. And that's a really important part. And people who are good at creativity are good at consciously saying, I think this is what I'm interested in working on. The next brain network involved is often called the imagination network, which, speaking of Disney, I always think sounds like a ride at Disney World or something. And that is unconscious. And that's those are the brain networks that start running those simulations that I mentioned. And that's interesting because they take the information on that focused executive attention network idea, but then they use all of your knowledge and experience, everything you know about anything, and they put those two together and they start running simulations. Well, I wonder what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And that all happens unconsciously. And then the last network that's involved is called the salience network. And that, to me, is almost the most interesting part, because the salience network is constantly monitoring all of your brain activity and watching all those simulations. And the salience network goes, ooh, that one. That's a good idea. And then plucks that idea and brings it up to your conscious thought. And I know, Damien, if you've ever had like an aha moment, where like you take the dog for a walk and you're not even thinking about the creative project, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, wait, I know, I could do this. Well, that's your salience network just plucked one of the ideas running around in the imagination network and brought it to your conscious thought. And that's what I know about how the brain works with creativity. And I am really fascinated with it for many reasons. I don't know if I think many of us are creative in our work. And then we also sometimes have hobbies, right? So one of the things I do, I compose music. And so I've been really fascinated in the last 10 years. I've really been amping up my composing and my music knowledge and learning and taking classes. And of course, then while I'm doing that, I'm kind of watching the whole creative process, and how that works. And so I've been kind of experimenting with myself on some of this, and just I have a lot of fun just watching the process and thinking about
You're a level
creativity.
ahead, like
Yeah, meta. I'm always
assessing.
doing a meta analysis on
That's
what's
amazing.
going on.
Good
So that
your
was
thoughts on it.
That was
yeah.
my
No,
yeah,
no,
that
no.
was
Well, that was important, right? Because
yeah.
that's the brain side. Okay, so your second half of that question was about can AI replacing creatives. It is you could be right and wrong at the same time, Damien. So, for example, you could be 100% right that AI cannot replace creatives, and yet there are creative jobs that get replaced, and these might be different things. There's a lot of we're talking about creativity. I know even let's take music composing for example. Okay, and this is true of a lot of fields. There is it's some percentage where you're doing the creative thought, like, oh, that's the hook, that's the brilliant idea, that's the aesthetic, oh boom, we got it right, and that's that creativity. But then there's a whole bunch of other schlop that you got to do, that's
Yes.
production work, that's
Yes.
not creative,
Right.
that's very rote, that's a thing that you got to do over and over again. I remember once I was at band camp, jazz camp, when I was way back when I was younger, and there was a saxophone teacher, and he had toured with like Aretha Franklin. He's a very good saxophone teacher, and so he said, "Why am I better than all of you in this room? What makes me a better saxophone player than you?" And he said, "Is it because I'm more creative?" And he said, "No. Most of you in here probably are musically more creative than I am. But what I can do that you can't is I can express my creativity through my fingers into the world. That's what I can do. And that's why I'm better than you are." And so there is a point about you that, yes, the being creative, but then there's the transferring it. And that's a big pain. And so a lot of the creative field, in my personal opinion, a lot of time is spent just in that transfer. Like, I'm sure the video that ran when we, first did that, there was a high level of polish. That takes a ton of work where you got camera angles and this and sets and like it's a whole thing that I don't know a whole lot about. And I'm sure in order to put that all together, there's a lot of work that's not creative work, that's technical work. So to kind of tie it all together, I think you can be right and wrong. I think even if, and we can talk about AI more, but even if we start with the premise that yes, AI isn't creative, not in the way humans are. I think creatives may still be concerned because now you're talking about budget and you're talking about repetition and you're talking about jobs, and there are other things that happen in creative industries that could kind of harm that, even if for that one slice that can't be replaced. So hopefully that
That's
long
amazing.
harangue made sense.
No, I really like the science and more of the execution reading here. Like that's really really important. One of the things that we are discovering as we talk with more creatives and all that is that today, especially in creative agencies, before AI, a lot of the value was on the production, like how many banners you can do, how many videos you can create, how like
Yeah.
it was a lot of the execution part, the financial value, right? That's where they got the money.
Mm.
And then now, because AI is accelerating all of that, it's producing faster, easier, cheaper. The value goes back to the creative side, like the pre-execution, right? So agencies, creatives will be able to charge more because of their creativity, their thoughts, their ideas. And one of the biggest challenges that we hear, and this is our problem number one, is that we're tackling, is this idea of, I'm a creative person, I had this idea, I have to transfer it to your head. I need to transfer my thought to your head. And the way people do that in the current execution process is, first of all, that thought is very emotional, right? Humans are emotional creatures. Like, you can read so much more if we see our eyes or our gestures, right? Like, we are emotional and we're social. And then when I have to transfer that thought on something that didn't work the way I wanted, or I'm just conveying the first idea, normally that process is very broken. Right? People use text a lot. Um, Text, as we know, doesn't carry a lot of that emotion. It creates ambiguity. It can create more problems if I say I like it or I like it. I don't like it. Like, there's no weight in text, right? So translating that emotional thought into text makes creatives lose a ton of fidelity, and that's something we're trying to fix with Pacto. What do you guys think of that transferring challenge and the current ways of humans exchanging thoughts, like ideas and feedback?
You got to start with Gutenberg. I mean, it's a joke, but it's also not a joke. If we think back a bajillion years before there were literacy, and Susan, you talk about reading a lot. Reading and writing is, there are many things in the brain that we have spots for, like vision. Almost everyone is born with a part of the brain for vision, just a thing we do. There is not a part in the brain for reading and writing. So that is a learned skill that we do young, that eats other parts of the brain to have that there. It is in some ways unnatural in a way that speech is natural. And so a bajillion years ago, creatives, you had oral traditions. If you wanted to write something down, boy, was that a pain. Would take forever to handwrite if you knew your letters, and the vast majority of people didn't. And even if after the printing press, that, like you said, the technical stuff, you needed the equipment, you needed people who knew how to operate a printing press, which is no easy feat at all. And then maybe you could get your idea out into the heads of other people. And ever since the printing press, that has been the easiest and most convenient way for a long time to get your ideas from your head very cheaply into the heads of other people. Printing text, it's really fast, it's very easy. And so I don't think it's necessarily a surprise that even today it's still sort of the default. You can do it in silence, you can do it in a noisy environment, the projecting, and then the input, you can do it in silence, you can do it in a noisy environment. And it's very cheap and it's very fast. So, right, how else do we communicate? Obviously, video, is sort of one. Pictures is another. But the cost of sending video, both in terms of the production side, you have to have a camera. It's a little harder. The auditory side, right? If it's noisy, you can't send or receive. That's an issue. It's one of the reasons I think TikTok has been so pervasive, is because you can enjoy TikTok with zero sound. It's video with just audio captions. And so you don't have to, that opens up a new channel. So I think that it's a problem that I don't necessarily think humans have solved. The getting out of the head easily into the heads of others quickly, easily, that's not text-based. It's only been like 600 years And so far, I think text still is the fastest and easiest way to do that.
Yeah, you know, it is, but it's interesting because it isn't perfect, right? And especially
No,
when
it's not.
when you're going from the thought you have is visual, and then you translate that into words,
Yeah.
and then you send that to someone else who then reads it and then hopefully produces a vision in their head. But you know what? It's not going to be the same vision. So, you know, the whole thing is like all these pieces, and you're right, Guthrie, it's ubiquitous. We're used to it. But there are a lot of flaws in there, right?
Well,
Doing it that way.
but in this, the reason it's great, and I'll turn this into AI, because words are the same. So the word box is the same on every piece of paper. You write box, everyone kind of knows what box is. The problem once you get into these other fields is that it's not standardized. So if I draw a box, my box looks different than your box. That looks different than the next box I draw. It's not standardized. It will always be different. And so that's cool because you can add that gradation. You know, this is a big box, this is a small box, this is a box drawn by someone who knows how to draw, this is a box drawn by Guthrie who doesn't know how to draw. You know, but because it's always different, it means you're probably going to have more translation errors because every single box is different. So how can you communicate your vision? It's not going to be what, you know. So that's the genius of text. And the way I would say it would AIify it, imagine a system where every time you drew a box, the AI would make every box exactly the same. So that, you know, we're using a picture, but your box is my box, is her box. It's all the same, you know, box. I don't know if that's useful because part of the whole point of drawing is that it's you can do more than that. But that is also certainly a limitation because yeah, that's why words are so great because it's always the same. You know exactly the message that it's going to communicate. And if you need to communicate more, you just add more words. Big, brown, cardboard, box, you know.
Of course, you are talking to two people who write books, so we might be slightly biased to
No, but
words.
this is really really interesting, right? I feel like what creatives in the sense of, oh, I'm working at this amazing creative agency or Adobe, and I need to create a video to trigger some sort of emotion in other humans, right? I think creativity has a lot to do with senses. Like it's the person that had that idea, that thought, now trying to activate the senses of the receptor there to then feel something, right? So creativity is emotional. Text tries really hard to rationalize that. In a book, perfect. That's I think very easy to do, and not easy, but very efficient to do. But if you talk about creating emotion, activating senses on other humans, creating artifacts that will create that new emotion, text loses a ton of fidelity, doesn't carry fidelity, and it creates a ton of frustration. So we just had a very good meeting with a creative, one of the best minds that we know in creativity, and he was like, when I have to give feedback, I'm angry, I'm frustrated. I'm giving that feedback because they didn't do it the way I thought they would. Like it's like, so it's not something fun. So it's not something. So text might be a limitator in creativity in the sense of triggering emotions in other humans. Does that make
It
sense?
can be, but it doesn't have to be. You know, one of the interesting things, for instance, the research on fluent readers, readers who read really well, is as they're reading, they're recreating, you know, if it's well written, they're creating all the images, all the emotions, all the feelings in their own brains, and they're having those feelings. In fact, if you look at if you have someone in an fMRI machine, and while they're reading, their brain is like, if it's well written, their brain is lighting up as though they are the ones on the bumpy train, crying because they've just lost someone that's important to them. It can. We as humans are constantly breathing stories into everything, including what we read. So it has to do with how well it's written. But it is definitely, though, an extra layer to have an idea or a concept or a vision, and then have to translate that into words and hope that you do such a good job at that the person on the other end reading it will get the gist of what you're trying to say. I mean, it's a lot of work to do that.
Well, and it's different too, because it's what's the output. If I'm reading Harry Potter and there's a castle and the castle is described in words and everyone imagines the castle in their head, it kind of doesn't really matter what the castle looks like. Okay, your castle's a little different than my castle. This
Right.
stairway's a little different than that stairway. It's well written. It all kind of makes sense. We can all enjoy that castle in our mind in some ways. It is different in your situation if the castle then has to be created in a movie set and seen visually, right? So if your castle is different than my castle, that's a problem. So I do think it right? Like, so text is great if the output doesn't particularly matter, right?
Precision.
I feel the emotion, but like, I don't have to then like recreate something that's someone that's based on an objective scale of right and wrong, right? I just have to experience it in my head.
And I think
so that's different.
The whole idea of using AI for some of this, for instance, I know someone who I'm working with who recently used AI to create a storyboard for the design of a product. And she was very excited about using AI to do it, but then she was very frustrated because she, and we're all we're learning how to give prompts, and AI is learning. But she had this series of storyboards, but in every frame of the storyboard, like, the guy's hair would be different. And she was, she's like, no, the guy needs to look the same. And she spent an enormous amount of time drawing, like changing the drawings physically so that the hair would look the same, So I think, I think it's important, if we're using AI tools to do this kind of expression of creativity, that, the AI tools have to really pay attention to exactness, because that's what we're trying to free ourselves up so that we don't have to do that, because in that situation, the way the hair looks on the guy in the storyboard, that's not part of what I'm bringing as the creative. But it's still important that it be consistent, and how do we communicate that?
It's like a hole in your story, right? You as the creator, because continuity is not there, there's all like this inconsistencies, that's hurting your story, right? That's hurting your transferring of that thought to the other person.
And that's not the part I want to have to work on, right?
Yes.
I'm hoping to use these tools to do that part for me, because there's other stuff that I feel as the human creative I need to work on.
That's so true. And one of the things that we were talking the other day too was AI tools. They can do, let's say, they can accelerate the generation of a ton of things like images and all that, but that last 20% of polishing and making sure it's done right in Photoshop, and all the parts of that product are there, that takes, it should be taking like 20%, but it takes another 80% of
Right,
the time,
right,
and it
right.
creates a lot of
To get to
frustration.
that, yeah,
Yeah,
because you want to get, you leap forward quickly, and now you have this long tail of a lot of
yes,
work that
yes.
you were hoping you didn't have to do.
And a lot more
Yeah,
assets too, right? With AI, you have a lot more assets to review and provide
it's more
feedback.
stuff.
And
You just created more stuff.
Well, I'll have okay. So one of the things that we haven't seen yet is we're talking about human creativity. And part of the whole thing of marketing and having creatives is to differentiate yourself. So, right, like I could just remake, like Casablanca, the movie, like 45 times in a row, but like scene for scene, and maybe just change out the actors. It would be a weird thing to do. Part of the whole purpose but why things are popular is because they're new and they're different, and there's like that's the whole point. That's a second part of the human part of creativity is what exists, and then what can we do to signify to the other people that no, we are not like all the other people. That's like the whole thing of the counterculture and creativity, and then eventually that counterculture gets slurped into the corporate entities because they want to prove that they're not like all the other corporate entities, and then that become and the cycle continues, right? So this is where what we haven't seen yet, because we are just in the beginning phases, and these culture cycles take, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years. I mean, it takes a little bit to we did skinny jeans, and then we did kind of, and now we do big jeans, and we'll get back. It takes a little bit to kind of work its way through. So now we're starting to get all this AI generated slop, and some of it's better than slop. I'm not here to say that like AI won't get really, really good at doing some of the stuff that creative people used to do a couple years ago. But what we haven't seen yet then is the counterculture reaction to it. If every single company can make a cool thing that right now would look like what creatives are doing, then there's no differentiation. And so the creatives of tomorrow are going to have to figure out what to do to make their work stand out and not look like the AI generated stuff that's happening. And so
yeah,
I don't have the answer to that. It's definitely going to happen. But there's right, like the whole point is we need to create something new. So it is possible that the next phase of what's popular, the next aesthetic, are things that AI is bad at generating. Like the society will create jobs for creators that are not AI, because that's the thing that's cool, because otherwise it's what everyone else is doing. So it's almost, it's like you like society demands human creators, because because that's the value
That's what's
of,
unique.
that's what's unique. That's actually the value of the creativity in and of itself. And we haven't really gotten there
Mm.
yet, because we're just doing the first wave. And I mean, I guess a little bit like there's sort of that like AI image, that's kind of weird. And for whatever reason, I mean, I know AIs can generate all sorts of different images and a variety of styles, but there was that sort of very kind of like fake glamorous with the perfect lighting AI image that happened. And even in the last year, I feel like I'm starting to see less of it, as it's uncool. 5-10 years ago, you had a picture like that. Whoa, that's really cool. Like, oh, it looks so interesting. And now because it's easily generated and it's everywhere, people don't want to use that anymore. So that is all to say, I do think that in a couple years we will start to see this trend of differentiation based on human creativity, even if AIs can do creativity, even if we concede that point in the beginning, again, it may not matter because what's aesthetically cool, what's a differentiator, is not using AI like all the other companies are doing. And I don't know what that looks like yet, but
Yeah, no,
that
we
maybe
have
may happen.
this discussion a lot internally, and we were the other day we are talking like if Coke and Pepsi are using AI for everything, they will, because it will optimize so much for conversion and all that. It will be the same thing at the end. Like you will end up in this infinite place where it's the same thing. That's why having that human, that
Yeah.
intentional hallucination that's so human, right? That the simulation that Susan mentioned is so critical. One thing that I also want to talk that's very 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 important for us is the idea of collaboration, right? That's, I remember one of our advisors, he worked for Pixar for 20 years, and he was saying that what made Pixar so creative, so amazing, was the insane constant feedback loops that they had on every single shot. So humans go into a room and just sharing thoughts, change this, change that, what if this, that. And that collaboration, that iteration made something special at the end. What do you think of the brain side of things in humans collaborating with other humans to iterate and, in our case here, create the new?
Yeah, I think iteration is fascinating, and you know, you can iterate on your own, but iterating with other people and collaborating with other people, it's one of those meta things I've been doing with the music composition. Um, uh, in there's a music writing songwriting group I belong to, and part of what we do is uh, give each other feedback and iterate together, and um, it's just always interesting to me to see uh, and to experience the feeling of that when someone else comes up with an idea that you didn't realize or you didn't think of or you thought of but discarded previously, but then they say it and you just see it and you go, oh yeah, oh, so much better, you know. And then the next iteration of the song, it's just whether it's the lyrics or the music or the chord progression or whatever it is so much better. And you know, you worked on that for hours and didn't come right. And in literally sometimes minutes, you know, you get feedback from different members of the group and you're just like, oh my gosh, so much better. So I think that uh, you know, getting ideas and insights from other people um, when you're being creative is so important because remember your brain is running simulations based on your experience and knowledge. And so if you're collaborating with someone else, that's a whole nother brain that just, you know, which is
That's
huge
true.
amount of information
Yeah.
and knowledge and ideas you just tapped into it. And then you have like 3 people, 4 people. It's like, you know, exponential brain power
Brain power,
that
yeah.
can just really quickly zero in, come up with an idea. And they're not all great ideas, but just that amount, it's huge. You know, I think it's hard sometimes, I think, for creative people to want to share their ideas and to be open to other people's ideas.
Requires
If
maturity, right? Yeah, you have to
Yeah,
be.
if you can get over that and just think of it as I need more brain power, you know, the more brain power, the better. You know, then you quickly learn how very powerful that is. And you know, the research also shows that when you bring a group together to collaborate, to have more diversity in the group, right? Because if I'm collaborating with people who have very similar experience and knowledge as me, that will still help, but not that much. But now if I bring in someone who's got different experience and knowledge than I do, you know, that means the simulations they're running are really different, and that will really
So
help me.
that's That's amazing. That idea of brain power, accessing more brain power. One of the things that we're trying to solve with Pacto too is in this journey of maximizing creativity, we identified that whenever you're thinking creatively, you're giving your feedback, and you have to stop thinking to start typing. You, almost like you switch your brain to a different mode that, as we said in the beginning, it's not natural. We had to develop that. Then we kind of break something. And with Pacto, our idea is like, what if we don't stop? Like, you just keep thinking creatively, because that will take you to thoughts, to simulations that will never occur because you had to change your brain mode to
Well, you know, and
formalize that thought.
I totally agree with you, Damien. And I want to bring up one other thing, which is small but not small. When we talk about, you know, coming up with the feedback in words, and we're literally talking about typing. We know that the parts of the brain that are active when you are typing on a keyboard are very different than when you are, for instance, handwriting.
Wow.
And moving your hand and, you know, circling something and writing something. Even if you circle and then write a phrase, that is a different brain process than typing. So I think you're absolutely right. When we switch into typing mode, you know, that's a different skill. It's muscle memory. It's a whole nother part of the brain you've just activated, which is sometimes fine and what you want to do, but it is a switch, and maybe you don't want to make that switch.
It's kind of you're limiting your creativity, right? In a
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe not. Maybe you are accessing.
Maybe you're
Because,
accessing
again,
something
yeah.
new, but it is
Yes.
a switch. And you know, Guthrie and I this morning were editing a book we're writing, and you know, we're sitting in front of the text and we're typing, and he asked me, you know, can you figure out a better way to rephrase this? And I said, okay, hold on, I'm just going to talk in my own words. I'm not going to type. And when I did that, then it came out, and now, you know, because it was creative. I had to try and figure out how to express what I was feeling, and how to express what was this big concept. And I couldn't just sit down and type it. I had to, you know, think about it and just talk, and then we could go back and type it.
I think there's also a sort of a probabilistic, you know, pretty, what they call it, they talk about tails, right? The tails on the you know. I think expressing yourself in a medium is, you know, bell curve. And there, for a lot of people, text works great because it's more of a lower common denominator. There's a lot of people who are okay at expressing themselves in the fat part of the bell curve. They're okay at it, and the people reading it are okay receiving it. And so in that way, it kind of works because it's good enough, and most people are okay at it. If you talk about high level writing, because we write books, Susan and I, we are not, I wouldn't call, I am a good writer, but in the grand scheme of people who can really write, I'm pitiful, you know, right? So I'm closer to the edge of that thing, but like the people at the tail who are really good at writing, they maybe could write like think and express themselves writing in a way that, you know, I or, you know, Susan can't do, right? We have to say it out loud because we're really good at talking, really good at expressing myself with talking, right? But some people probably can express themselves that well writing. And I think that's true of most mediums. So, you know, talking about sketching, drawing, visual stuff, there are probably, you know, you're working with creatives, you're probably working with that tail who can really express themselves really well, pretty easily, just drawing and sketching. If you gave me a pen and paper and said you can't write any words, just draw your thoughts, right?
God.
Yeah.
Like I can't do it, and like maybe kind of, in conjunction with words, right? If I could say, and then I'm thinking this, and I like, I'm maybe, right? But it's not a natural thing for me. And so I think, the bell curve when it comes to drawing, you have a big fat, place in the bad section, and then it kind of tails off into the good section. Whereas writing, a lot of people are in the okay section. So I do think that, right, like in places where good enough is okay, writing has dominated that. Like emails, it's a lowest
It is.
common denominator kind of thing. But when it comes to things where it's it's not just good enough, well, now you're talking about the people in that tail, and that's and maybe there's magic that can happen there.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot. We saw this spectrum of creative intent, right? If it's okay for a small business to have this business card this way that can be done in Canva super fast, the creative intent there is low, right? And that's okay. That's easy. AI can help a lot there. But if you go on the other end, and it has to be super high end, super polished, and a lot more, I would say, impactful, then
Or
the creative intent
precise,
is a lot
precise with a
bigger.
vision.
Yes.
Yeah.
May, this is amazing, guys. I'm really, really, my brain is just firing right now. I'm running a lot more simulations now. I know that. One of the things that I want to, maybe the last question as we end this, almost like as as a gift that I want to leave for my kids. I have two kids, 9 and 5. Guthrie, you have a kid now, you know that. How do you feel about this new world where AI is very present? A lot of the initial steps of creating something like a document, or doing like that beginning, that bureaucratic, that initial structure that used to take a lot of brain power, AI can do. Do you think humans will be, like, their brains will be more powerful because of that, or it's gonna hurt because there's no effort in that anymore? What do you think about, like, how can I do something to keep my kids running as many simulations as possible, instead of just consuming or not thinking about that grit of the first steps of creating something?
I don't think it's more or less. I do think it's different. I think um, I- technological change is always hard because it takes time for society to adapt to it, and it might just be a generation thing. Like it might just, like I am just old enough to grow up where, you know, there were there were a couple years without a cell phone for me. I had a cell phone very early on, but there were a couple years where I didn't have one. So if you were somewhere and you needed to get in touch with someone, you actually couldn't do it, right? If you weren't like, you would have to like go find some farm somewhere and knock on a door. I mean, you're in sort of like emergency mode. You had to make pretty concise plans beforehand. And then okay, cell phones, and we're off to the races. So I have some inkling of that, but you know my kid won't have any inkling of that ever, that will ever exist, probably. The idea that you wouldn't be able to get in touch with someone, just and so like the entire way of thinking and processing and where does the energy go, it's just different. um uh, you know um think back 100 years, kids would spend a lot of time on the washboard outside, scrubbing clothes, daydreaming, talking. I don't know what they did. I wasn't there. It was probably, we would call it a boring existence, but they figured it out. Um, so, so in the same way, if you're growing up with AI stuff that makes it really easy to generate all these things, it's just a new landscape that you have to orient yourself with. In some ways, I know this sounds weird. I think almost a bigger change, especially for teens and preteens, is social interaction moving from in-person to digital. I mean, I'm not there yet with a teenager, but I think that has been such a huge shift where people used to, if you were going to pick on someone, you used to do it kind of in person, and that was a whole social interaction. And now that stuff is happening digitally, in texts, in side comments. It's just a totally different way of navigating social worlds that you have to navigate it digitally. I think that totally changes the dynamics of everything. Having an AI assistant that's like, hey, I want to create a new movie. I'm the princess today, and I'm creating a new movie with my AI assistant. AI assistant, make an entire movie where I'm the princess, and then watch it. Like that's different. I don't know if it's more like energy or less energy, or it's probably about the same, but it's just a different way of playing, of thinking, of doing that stuff. But probably some of it is bad, maybe some of it's good. But I do think that it does take time to figure out the best way to kind of exist in the new landscape, and that's why it's so disruptive, because you have people who have created a whole system based on not having it, and now it's here. So it just takes time.
Yeah, and ask Guthrie. I'm a pessimist about
Huge
many things.
Pessimist, total doomer about everything,
and a huge pessimist about AI. However,
which you wouldn't think so, because your whole like humans are so cool, it's great, but I am. No.
However, there's a researcher, Marianne Wolf, who she has a book about the research on reading.
This is fun.
And she says in that book that when the printing press was invented, people said, this is the end of civilization. This will be such a huge problem and mistake. If everyone knows how to read, forget it. Society will end.
And they were right.
Their
society ended. There was a thing called the 100 Years War.
Yes.
That's a long time for there to be a war.
However, we did
have a new thing,
a long
right?
time. We adapted. We have a new thing.
Yeah, it's a new
thing. And Damien, it is a little funny that now you're talking about, is typing text and reading, is that right? Because that was the interrupter. That was the thing that blew everything apart hundreds of years ago. Now we have another thing.
I think if you'd ask people, hey, there's a new technology, what if AI causes a thing that in the future people will call the 100 Years War?
Yeah.
It would be like, AI sounds terrible.
Right.
And but we did that. Yeah, we did this with the printing press. And that was, yeah.
So humans are humans. Our brains take a lot longer to change than the tools we use. So I am actually optimistic about creativity, which, Guthrie, that's got to be like one of the few things you've ever heard me say I'm optimistic about.
Yeah. My only worry is,
I have lots of worries about AI, but yeah.
Yeah, I have lots of worries. My only worry about that particular slice is it's a little bit, when I was growing up, most technology was very bad. It was not user-friendly. It was technical. For software in particular. Okay. But the hardware had gotten to a point where I didn't really need to know how it works. So I'm a pretty handy guy. I fix things around the house. I probably could figure out how to, if down the road with much trial and error, repair an engine or something. Most people who are my age and younger, no clue, no interest, don't even know where to start. But that's because they grew up in a time when the polish for the hardware level was sort of beyond them. I grew up in a time when the software was terrible and you kind of had to know how to figure it out. So a lot of people my age are pretty tech literate in a lot of ways when it comes to, okay, here's how you this, okay, this, yeah, the printer because it did not connected to the network, this sort of beyond stuff. I've heard anecdotally that kids who are in high school now are terrible at tech troubleshooting, and which you would think would be the total opposite because all they do is use tech, but it's the same as me. I drive cars all the time. I don't know, necessarily, like I can't change the spark plugs, even though that's probably not a particularly difficult thing to do because I never have to deal with it. I never have to worry about it. I don't see it. And so kids growing up, they're just using apps that work all the time. When I was growing up, Windows would crash at least 4 or 5 times a week. Like that was like a thing. Like it's just like, oh, we blue screened and all your work of the day is gone. It was just a thing that you did on a regular basis and you had to adapt to it. So I do think that, there, you have, if you grow up and you don't have to figure it out ever, you don't, it's not that you're dumb or you're stupid. It's just
No,
you
it's
haven't
just
worked that muscle.
skill you don't have.
It's a skill you don't have. And so I do worry that in the future, if you have a child who, instead of having to sit down and create a world and just every single day I'm making an imaginary, tea party with my imaginary friends, you go, AI assistant, I'm having a tea party, generate the scene for me, that you'll just have a lot of kids who will grow up without that skill of how to be creative. Now, they'll have other skills that we don't know what they're going to have skills at, right?
But they may not have that one.
But they may not have that one. So if you're worried about anything, I do think that the lack of repetition is just going to mean there's a world without skills. But hey, like we have a world where people are much worse at shoveling coal. Used to be people were pretty good at shoveling coal and keeping, a wood furnace going. We don't have those skills anymore. People aren't good at splitting wood in society. It's just, I don't know if that's good or bad, but that skill doesn't exist. The technical skills might go away. A lot of the engineering, putting things together, and a lot of people have gone away because it's gotten so precise with the level of manufacturing and the level of you can't, back in the day you could get an engine to work. They're so advanced now that you can't really do that.
Catherine, you sound like someone who's like 80 years old.
Thank you. I am. And maybe with creativity, you kind of see a similar thing, right? Like, why do I need to be creative when the internet's there and when the AI's there and I have literally endless entertainment constantly all the time.
It's a really good point.
It's so amazing, guys. Thank you so much for your time. I think we all, I was curious and anxious, I would say, about your thoughts on this idea of creativity being uniquely human. I think we all agree that, yes, it can be the ultimate differentiator for what really matters, what really allows society and like civilization to evolve, to create this new thing that didn't exist before. People need other people to continue to live and to iterate, and that's even better. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you for all the details, all the science behind it. I always love speaking with you guys. And yeah, if possible, let's stay in touch. How can people find you? Like if they want to learn more, buy your courses or books?
Boy, we're in a little bit of a state of flux. You can go to our website, which is theteamw.com. LinkedIn's a good place. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we gotta get, some of our socials are changing, so sort of influx there. But yeah, LinkedIn's a great place. You can either look for us personally or the Team W. We also have LinkedIn page there.
Just one more thing, like I forgot I'm curious, small but important. A question on what AI can do that sometimes can trick the human brain. We see these experiments of people like talking to voices of people that died already. Like, how do you see that kind of brain, like almost like you like it's not real, right? It's synthetic, but the brain doesn't know that. Right? Like what's your take on that? Like the AI traps, let's say.
They're probably going to be bad. It'll probably cause lots of problems. But, there are limitations that could maybe be overworked. So Susan talks a lot about how important haptic is, having a feel
Tactile, sense of touch.
or even a sense of an object that exists in a physical space. So, if I hold up a cup, right? You can see the cup, it's a cup, but there's something different about the cup. Like theoretically I could throw it at your face, right? And it would hit you, there's just something different about that. So I don't think it'll ever be, 1-to-1, where it'll be, people won't want to be around other human beings in person or anything like that. I think there's something special there, with the tactile nature of it. That is different, but I'm sure what you're saying will cause all sorts of terrible problems in society and probably ruin all sorts of stuff and cause chaos, and it'll be a whole thing that we'll have to deal with. So there you go. That was appropriately
Very
doomerism.
pessimistic. I liked it, Guthrie.
Okay, yeah. Susan, what do you think?
Well, I think that humans have again, all this technology goes on and advances really quickly, and our brains do not evolve that quickly. They evolve and change very slowly. And we are beings that are used to moving in a physical world. And I know we do a lot of stuff digitally, but ultimately our brains and our bodies are designed for movement through the physical world. And we are very sensitive when something seems not quite right, not quite real, not quite human. And that will freak us out a lot, especially if we're not expecting it. We can watch a movie about aliens and we're kind of expecting it. It'll still creep us out, right? But we have a very fine-tuned sense of, no, not okay, not okay. We have unconscious parts of our brain that will just light up and say, that's not okay. That's not a real human. Now, it's hard for us to tell sometimes with some of these new techniques, but that sense of is not going to go away. It's not going to go away, not for a long, long time.
That's amazing. Survival like triggers, right? That prevent us from
automatic triggers. Yeah.
Getting hurt. Awesome. Guys, again, thank you so much. Amazing content. We're going to write a blog post and we'll share with you. But
wonderful.
Please stay in touch. And
it was great to see you again.
Really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks, I miss hanging out. We'll see you soon.
As a creative professional working with clients and peers, I often find myself in a loop, constantly typing out feedback on multiple devices and tools. Discovering Pactto has allowed me to eliminate typed feedback and instantly send a recorded video with my action items. With Pactto, I can easily review videos, websites, images, 3D files, and audio files. My feedback can then be sent as a link with clear action items faster than any other tool out there. Pactto has changed my daily lifestyle. I now have more time than ever to do what I love most.